So today we're going to fill in some notes on interpreting the remainder. If it does not specify what to do with the remainder, in my opinion, if I'm just dealing with whole number divided by whole number, my opinion, the easiest thing to do is to turn that remainder into a fraction by putting the remainder over the divisor. Then you're going to want to simplify that fraction as well. Whenever we're dealing with fractions, our final answer should be simplified. But in this case, your answer will be a mixed number. So there are other times it might explicitly say, give a mixed number answer for such and such. But if it doesn't say, and I don't have a decimal in either my dividend or my divisor, then I can go ahead and make a mixed number answer. The example here is a real life type situation where you would expect a fraction answer. So fractions are used a lot in baking and in cooking. Like if you ever helped out in the kitchen, you notice the measuring cups and the measuring spoons have fractional amounts. So in this example, you need 22 cups of flour to make a cake for 120 people. So this scenario is like you're at a wedding and the cake was so super wicked awesome and somehow you got the recipe, but the recipe is for 120 people. And you probably aren't going to be having 120 people when you have a gathering. So let's say you want to make the same cake but for only 20 people, which is 1/6 of the amount. So you're going to divide each ingredient by 6. So it says, how much flour do you need? So I'm going to go ahead and do the work sideways just in case it takes a bit of space. This one's not as bad as the next one. But I'm going to divide the 22 cups for the big recipe by 6 to get my smaller version of the recipe. So I say how many times does 6 go into 2? It doesn't. How many times does 6 go into 22? It goes in 3 times, because 3 times 6 is 18, and I subtract and I get 4. At that point I'm ready for the remainder. So everybody should be filling in division problem here. The remainder is 4. I have 4 out of another 6. 4 out of 6 is the fraction. Again, we want to simplify it, because if you ever did help out in the kitchen, you aren't going to find a measuring cup that says 4/6. So I'm going to say 3 2/3. A lot of people will say 3 2/3 flour. That doesn't tell me how much flour, so I have to make sure I reread the problem, pay attention to the units, and say 3 2/3 cups, or cups of flour. Make sure you have the proper units. For the next scenario, if it specifically says I need a decimal answer, or if either number I'm given has a decimal in it, I'm going to make sure I get a decimal answer and deal with the remainder in a decimal way. So you can add a decimal point if needed. And 0, parentheses S, could be more than 1 0, to the original dividend. So we're not changing the value if we add zeros after the decimal point, so that you can continue bringing down and dividing. So we're going to use this scenario if either number already has a decimal point, or if it specifically says express your answer as a decimal. This is the one where I'm going to need to go sideways on it. This is a semi-true scenario. To travel 814.8 miles from Medford, Mass., that's where Tufts University is, to Huntington, West Virginia, that's where my roommate lived, it took 16 hours. That's the part that's a little less than realistic, because we might have gone a little faster than that. Always obeying the law, though. All right. So what was the average speed? So the average speed, we're going to divide by 16, and you're going to want to leave yourself lots of room for tacking on extra zeros. Because there is a decimal in the dividend, I need to come up with a decimal answer in the end. Also, just if you ever thought about your odometer on the car, it's ticking up by decimals, by tenths usually. So 16 does not go into 8, but it goes into 81 5 times. I'm getting dizzy already. Ooh, hairbrush. Going sideways hurts a little bit. 5 times 16 is 80. I subtract, I get 1. You can turn your paper sideways, you don't have to turn your head. And then I bring down the 4. 16 goes into 14 0 times. At that point, I could say 16 times the 0 is the 0, and I subtract and I get 14. Or if I've put the 0 up there, I can just bring down the next digit, the 8. But you know me, I forget things a lot. So I go ahead and put my decimal point in before I bring down that 8, or before I start dealing with that 8. So I don't forget that that's where it was. Mine's a little misaligned because of being on the smart board, but hopefully yours lined up real nicely. How many times is 16 going 148? I may have done a little guess and check and then had to go back and fix it, but that's okay. I ultimately found that it went in 9 times. It's 9 times 16 is 144. Then I subtract and I get 4. At this point I don't have any more digits to bring down, so this is where I'm going to tack on another 0. 16 goes into 40 2 times. That's 32. Still didn't work out evenly, so I'm going to tack on another 0 to bring down. 16 goes into 80 5 times. Hurrah! I finally had it work out evenly. So then I reread the problem so that I can put the appropriate label on. The average speed was 50.925 miles per hour, or miles for each hour, or the average speed was, something where you go ahead and describe the average speed was miles for each hour of travel. Questions, issues so far? That's a fraction answer, that's a decimal answer. Doesn't always work out, you can have either one. So in the last section, we have that sometimes you cannot have a portion of an amount. If it says, how many mugs can you make with a certain amount of clay? You can't make 2/3 of a mug. It wouldn't hold the liquid, or it wouldn't have a handle. It would be missing something. So you either make a mug or you don't make a mug. If it says, how many boxes of Expo markers do you need to buy? You can't buy 1/4 of a box of Expo markers. So you either have to buy a box or you don't have to buy a box. So in these scenarios, you have to decide whether to bump up. If it's just telling you you have to buy boxes, you either buy a box or you don't buy a box. You can't be like Steve Martin in the grocery store ripping buns out of the bag. Alright. So the last situation is you have to interpret what's going on. So in some word problems, you might not be able to take a portion of an item. So you need to decide if you will bump up. Notice I'm not saying round. A typical scenario is, you're going on a field trip and you got such and such amount of students, and how many buses do you need to book? You've heard it before, right? You don't round. You don't go, oh, well, there's only 2 more kids. I won't book another bus. I'm going to round down. You're not going to make those 2 kids walk. You have to bump it up to the next whole number. So you have to bump up, even if it's only a remainder of 1. You have to bump it up to the next whole number. Or you might go down to the previous thing. To the previous whole number thing. That's lovely. So in that situation would be like, well, you can almost make another shirt, but you can't. You either make a shirt or you don't make a shirt. So even though it might be like a 9/10, you can make 7 9/10 shirt. 9/10 shirt still got something missing. Still not a complete shirt. So you can only make the 7 shirts. So typically the bumping up is how many do you need situation, and the going down is when it's how many can you make, or that sort of thing. So here's another realistic scenario. There are about 40 weeks in a school year. And this eraser here, if you notice, it's got the stripes. Those stripes are actually removable layers. So that once it gets super duper messy, I can strip off a layer and have a fresh clean layer to do more erasing with. So back when we didn't have the smart board and I was writing on the board super lot, I used to use about 1 of these sheets per week. So if there are 40 weeks in a school year and I'm using 1 sheet per week, you would do 40 divided by 12 to figure out how many I need for the whole school year. So let's go ahead. You can turn it sideways if you want, but hopefully we know 40 divided by 12 is going to give us just a 3, with a remainder of 4. So how many erasers do I need to get? in order to make it through the 40 weeks of school, sir? I need 4 erasers. If you're ever not certain, try it out. Well, 3 times 12 will give me 36. Nope, that's not enough, so I need 4 times 12 to get 48. So again, you're going to be seeing lots of these on